Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. And it is brings me great pleasure to introduce to you for the second time British-born Susan Griffith-Jones, who is a creative, innovative artist who has dedicated her life to traveling the ancient inner pathways of the yogis, investigating the nature of existence from many angles and communicating the light. Organizing the findings of her explorations into innovative symbolic representations into artistic documentaries whose timelines are built upon the sacred patterns embedded into them that are also displayed within her large photo collage of art and art installation pieces. Susan explains their meanings in her books and articles, as well as talking about them publicly at conferences, workshops, and the like. Susan is currently combining all 9 collage art pieces into installations that she made during the last 18 years as the individual parts of a larger machine that she's named the Magician's Jewel, whose shape and appearance represents universal truth in a symbol as well as a working device to generate energy that is designed to revitalize massive areas of land and people. Her website is pyramidkey.com. I'm going to tell you, she's back here for a second time. I really urge you to take a look at her work. It's phenomenal. And I'm going to read the poem that she basically shared with me again, because I really believe that the thought-provoking aspects of this poem is identifiable by all. Like walking through a passageway, they grab you from all sides. They slot you in to become a worker of the system. I walk on to create my own destiny. Give up my life, its purpose, my duty, diving off a cliff, learning to fly before hitting the bottom. I walk on to create my own destiny. Calling the guru from afar, reeling me in and stunning me with the methods. Learning the consciousness, I walk on to create my own destiny. Stabilizing spontaneity, allowing what happens to happen. Being at peace with the process, I walk on to create my own destiny. Taking hold of conscious tools, directly communing with source, sculpting reality. I walk on to create my own destiny. I welcome Susan Griffith-Jones. Thank you, Susan.
Hi, Enolia. That was actually really beautiful to hear you read that poem, because actually it does really capture what I'm trying to explain here in the process of leaping orbit, which doesn't happen all at once, you know, step by step. We start off with in our life, we're discovering, we're finding out, we're not sure where we want to go necessarily. And in fact, in the first verse, we know how the outer voices are trying to push us into this and that we may or may not be heartfelt interested in, although we may have shown some aptitude for. It may not be necessarily what we came here to this planet to actually do. And in a sense, it's a little bit like walking through a labyrinth, and each concentric circle, let's say, of the labyrinth, we are leaping orbit, getting a little bit closer to the end goal at the center. So I described last time several occurrences that happened throughout my life, which were major things that helped me to push my own boundary out from where I had self-imposed it to be, or in other words, self-imposed limitation that I had created. that had led me to stay inside that bubble of belief at that moment in time. So this is what I should be doing right now. And I did it. And then, oh, something happens, pushes you a little bit off kilter. And, oh, now I'm in a larger range of thought. Now I can actually do this and do that. I didn't think I could ever do that, but, oh, actually I can. So we've kind of pushed the boundary. We have gone beyond the self-limitation of where we had previously been. So I described a few circumstances in which looking back and joining the dots, I can say, this is where I feel I leapt orbit in my life. But, you know, how long does this leaping orbit story go on? This is really what we need to get to the...
Well, it goes on the duration of our life, right?
The duration of our life or lifetimes. You know,
Lifetime.
we're going as far as we can in the space of one bodily existence, and then we didn't get to where we actually needed to get to. Let's call it the heart of the labyrinth, metaphorically speaking. And so we come back to give it another go. But again, you know, we get caught in the self-limitations and this and that. And, you know, there's no judgment to be made about self-limitations. We actually need those barriers in order to be able to construct a reality. Otherwise, we just sort of dissolve into space, and we may go mad, actually. So there's nothing wrong in having those limiting thoughts, because they are a construct that help us to get to the point where we realize that we need to go beyond those constructs. And we do. Each of us, you know, I recounted what I've seen in my life. If we all go back over our lives, we're going to find moments where we leapt orbit. We were in that kind of world, and then we were suddenly, definitely in a greater sense. We had expanded our world into another shape and size. So we keep on going, we keep on leaping orbit, but where are we actually heading for? This is the point, you know. Which orbit is going to be the final orbit, or is there no final orbit? I mean, we can go round and round in discussion about this, but then that's kind of using the rationale and the logical mind. I want to go beyond this logical mind that has to understand everything and anything, and go a bit further into what people may even term as irrationality. So let's call it reason and irrationality. Now, if we talk about this mathematically, and I'm not going to go too far into this mathematically, being with you, Enolia, who is a mathematician, and me being not a mathematician, but just as an example. So if we look at reason as whole numbers, and if we look at irrationality as 1 over a whole number, which I think you call not an integer, there's the other word.
Prime? Are you talking about prime numbers, or are you talking about something else?
No. So when you've got a number 1
Fraction?
over something, I mean, what's the generic term for that?
Fraction.
Okay, a fraction.
You just talk about fractions.
Okay, so you've got whole numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you've got 1 over 1, 1 over 2, 1 over 3, 1 over 4, 1 over 5. So you know, once we get into the fraction world, into irrationality, we are always going to find that there's a number that goes to infinity behind the decimal point.
That's right.
So reason cannot reason with that, because it goes on forever. I mean, we do in our world. We cut it off with 2 decimal places, 3 decimal places. Otherwise, we couldn't even begin to, you know, use it in any way.
We make it finite versus infinite.
That's right. And actually, in the and now I'm going to put this very, very simplistically, but in universal harmonics, the 2 axes, one is the whole number and one is this fraction. And you can plot a chart through this grid of how frequencies affect, let's call it reason and irrationality, because these are the 2 parts of our mind. or two parts of our, even we can say the two parts of our brain that's connected by the corpus callosum in the center. So left brain, right brain, it's not exactly this part of the brain is doing this and this part of the brain is doing that, because each, apparently, I'm not a neurosurgeon, but apparently both parts of the brain do both things. But we say left brain, right brain, left brain for reason, right brain for more kind of expanded thought. So they also say that we use only potentially up to about 1 and at the very most 5%, which would be a very expanded logical logical use of consciousness, like a kind of genius level sort of consciousness. So, but normally as ordinary people, we use only 1% of the capacity of our logical brain. And then, of course, we're getting insights, we're getting intuition. These are little flashes that are coming through from the other side, and that enters our rational world, and it expands our rational world because it gives us ideas out of the logical reasoning grid that we have constructed for ourselves, by our education, by our culture, by our society. Let's call it kind of a matrix, you know, that we have constructed as our reality, that the other part of our consciousness is always actively trying to penetrate, because it has information about so much more than what we think is reality, you know, from our limited 1% universal view of reality. So in a sense, I suppose we could say that the moments of leaping orbit are also associated with moments when the information, the doorway opens and the information gets in from that larger expanded state of consciousness into our normal rational day-to-day thinking consciousness, and gives us what we call a, you know, light bulb moment. Oh, I suddenly realized that, or oh, it came to me that this may be possible. Or, you know, we all get those moments. It's not like, you know, only.
Yeah. And in the capacity of just knowing, like, oh, I know what to do now. Oh, this is exactly what has to take place. And step by step by step, it's already laid out in your mind and you're able to produce it here. So yes,
Exactly.
we all have.
That's also, in fact, is another word I use in the poem, is spontaneity. That is to be actually in that state of mind, you need to have developed, as I've experienced, a level of trust. Because, and why would you develop that trust? Because you've experienced it before, that it was okay. When you did that, it all turned out not just okay, it turned out fantastically. So you're like, let me give this kind of method a go again, and I'll just let go, I'll let it happen, and step by step by step, and oh, look, and even more magical this time. So, and I'm not saying it needs to be magical, but what I mean in the sense of using the word magical is that it surprises us. It's wonderful. It's like, oh, life is so beautiful moment. Like, how can that happen? You know, when we're going along, it's ordinary, and then suddenly there's this wow moment. And those moments are really what help us to develop this trust in allowing you know, this spontaneity to be a method that we use to actually drive our life, drive the direction of our lives. So yeah, coming back to the universal harmonics, when we look at one octave, we're looking at going from one pitch to another same pitch, which is exactly above the one below. Most people who are listening will probably be familiar with octaves because they've had some kind of interaction with music, but just to describe the basics for those who don't. And in between that pitch and that higher pitch, there could be a series of any notes. But we have developed the haptonic scale, the 7 notes, and then the 8th, which is the reoccurring pitch, which was the first note, because it works. It works. And if we go into dividing those 7 notes into all the semitones, we will discover a 12-noted octave, which lands up again, the higher pitch, at the 13th. Now, these are numbers that we've all heard everywhere: 7, 12, 8, 13. These are numbers that reoccur throughout all our mythologies and our cultures and the stories from the past, actually containing a lot of these stories and these mythologies and these historic mixed with mythological information that come down to us through our religious texts, through fairy tales, folklores, all these things. And they're actually ways of disguising this inner rhythm that we are all partaking of. The Greeks call it the universe of the spheres, and where you've got frequency going from 0 to infinity. But of course, we exist within a certain range of that. Our sensory apparatus as human beings allow us to hear, physically hear, and see certain vibratory ranges, which is not the only vibratory range existing, but it's what our senses allow us to appreciate. So as we get to the end of one octave, let's say we get to the 7th note and we arrive at the next pitch, this moment is a leaping of orbit. We have transcended that layer of octave and we're now back to the same place we were at the beginning, but at the higher level of it. And off we go again to do the next octave. And then the next octave, and then the next octave. But I just mentioned that this goes 0 to infinity. So where and how do we ever transcend this system? Are we meant to transcend it? Are we meant to just become able to at will control it so that we can, use the frequencies in certain ways and to do certain things? Or are we told very keenly in our, various mythologies and texts how we actually boot ourselves out of this system in the end? And one text I'm going to refer to here is only because it's a text that I've studied and worked with and also infused into the large installation art piece that I'm working on at the moment, The Magician's Jewel, where every part of it is actually a description of this text. And I'll come on to the reason why in a minute, is the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is in local lingo known as the Bardo Tudul. And this Bardo Tudul actually means liberation through hearing in between. Now let's just mark those words, in between, because the text of Bardo Tudul points to how we move through the various phases of our existence and the doorways we need to go through to get in and out of one or another state of being. Let's look at it from the point of view of the Bardo Tudul as a cycle where you are in a period of life, which they call the Bardo, means like a kind of space of life, period of life. And then it describes a very detailed way of how we exit our physical body and go into a space which is in between, where we are in between two things. And in between the let's say the passageway, the doorway, the process of getting from this physicality to that space also presents opportunities, very major opportunities, major doorways where we can actually get out of this looped system. Because if we fail to meet that doorway or to recognize that doorway, the Bardo Toro describes that we will stay in this period of in between for a period of, here we go, 49 days, 7 by 7. And then on the next 50th day, which is the beginning of the next octave, we will enter into the womb of a female being on earth. It could be human, could be animal, could be insect, could be whatever, depending on the frequency that we are, our let's say sum total of the frequency that we have attained. We will magnetically, or we will match that frequency and enter into the body of that, into the womb or egg or whatever of that creature. And again, we enter into physicality. And so we've got this system going round and round. Now, the Bardo Toro also describes in very great detail how these doorways don't only occur at major points like at death or at entering into a womb or being born, you know, this period of time in which that happens, because there is also, there are moment by moment, we have micro opportunities to also get out of the system. So when I say get out of the system, what I'm talking about is transcending all those octaves and reaching that next state, which may or may not be actually transcending the system, but transcending at least one system. What do we know? Maybe it goes on and on and on forever. Who am I to say that? It goes on and on forever or not, you know? But I'm just describing one text that uses these numbers reoccurring and points us towards the doorways. For example, it describes how we think. A thought is born, it stays a while, and then it dies. And then after it dies, there's a gap. Again, we have this living, staying, dying scenario, which is a repetitive sequence of events. So yeah, if we are able actually to be conscious enough or aware enough in our thought process that we can see a thought is now here and it's gone, and be in that state. And then as we learn to be in that state between thoughts, we can elongate that space and potentially be conscious in another kind of space of existence, which may be the ultimate space, as they describe in the Bardo Toro, the clear light, which is the source of all manifestation in that space. But maybe that's just a doorway to somewhere else. So
I absolutely love this because it makes me relate it akin to breath and being able to expand that breath in. And we forget about the space in between the breaths. So you take that breath in, but you forget to hold at the top. And when you hold at the top, that's acknowledging the space in between. And you breathe out and you hold at the bottom and acknowledging that space in between. And then that ability to start really fundamentally acknowledging that space in between, to me, is also like an entrance point to, I love that breath work. I love the fact that when you talk about the thought, the beginning, the end, the death of the thoughts, and the fact that we have how many thousands of thoughts a day?
Exactly. What an opportunity.
How many breaths a day that we don't, and
we breathe. What an opportunity.
What an opportunity. So take us along, take us further into the journey. Take us along.
I'll do it in just a moment, but just to add on to your idea about the breath also being that space in which we can find that doorway, we know that when we are breathing in, we are creating life force. So like we are breathing in universal life force, taking that into our own form. And then that is nourishing and creating and manifesting our physical body. And then that's the space you were talking about between breathing in, then that creative process happens, and then we breathe out. Now, what happens when we are really agitated? We start to breathe really fast, one on top of the other. So in a sense, there's no space for that creative possibility. There's no gap between in and out breath. There's no possibility to find a doorway in anxiety or in fear or in
Yes.
emotions which make us breathe in a different way than when we're relaxed and calm and everything's okay. We have, like, we naturally do it. We don't even really need to think about it. We start to breathe more evenly. But if we do start to think about it and we take it consciously, we consciously start to breathe, then actually we can use this in-breath, which is this kind of creative force, to manifest what is, at will, what is our purpose or goal. And again, this can come through contrived thought through the left brain and also intuitive thought through the right brain. And then we expel that air, kind of letting it go back out into the universal life force. But at the same time, we are also letting go and creating a stop moment. We've breathed in, we breathe in. There's this moment of in between where all this creative thing is going on, and we breathe out and it's stopped. And again, there's another gap, you see, another doorway between the expelling of breath and the intaking of breath. There's another doorway, another possibility, another kind of space, another kind of opportunity to expand our corporeal sense of reality. I'm here, I see around me what is exists, and I hear what I hear, it's true because somebody said it, and like this. I mean, that's a very simplistic way of describing it, because we've all got opinions and reasons and
Exactly.
ways of interpreting things. So that's a simplistic way of describing our sensual reality around us. But that's most.
But I think what you said is so key and so important, because that is the foundation of the understanding of when a person is shut down. If you're in fear, you're in anxiety, you're in anger, that the universal life force cannot be taken in to its capacity and then released. So therefore, you're really shutting yourself down and shutting down all aspects of your life force. Of what gives you breath, what gives you air, what gives you the opportunity to see the world in a different way. What gives you the opportunity to be at peace and to give you calm. Because everything we do is to acknowledge the space in between. Everything we do. So just thank you for highlighting that point.
But just to carry on with you asked me, so to continue the story, I'm going to do it in a rather shortened form, because actually the details don't really matter. It's what I'm really pointing to here are these moments of doing something which you never thought you could do. For example, I finished off with last time that I met my husband, my husband, who was in a situation actually at the time where he had to go beyond all societal and cultural belief about him and himself, where he was in his place in this world, in order to do what we did, was get married, get together and get married. So I explained before how my guru, who I was studying with at the time, great master of masters, His Eminence Chubgi Trichin Rinpoche, had sent me to my husband to study a set of yogas, which you had to have already had a certain initiation in order to do these yogas. And this initiation takes about a month to receive, of day by day empowerments and reading and teaching, and takes about a month. And I actually hadn't done that I hadn't taken that particular initiation at that time, although I'd done many, many others. I hadn't taken that particular initiation. And so when Rinpoche said to me, you need to learn this set of yogas, and I was like, oh, but Rinpoche, I have not yet done such and such an empowerment. Like I said, it takes a month. He leant over with his middle finger and he tapped the crown of my head and said, now you have. So, I mean, this is already fishy, you know, like, okay, you're giving me a 1 month empowerment with a tap in the head, a tap on the crown of the head. And okay, he's the master. He's the master. He can decide how he gives an initiation. I'm not one to, dispute what he's done. He said, now you've got it. Okay. He said, now you go and learn these yogas. Anyhow, the learning of the yogas meant an elongated period of time with who was to become my husband. And he himself, a very accomplished Lama in many different particular aspects of that level of the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. So he had this capacity to give the training in this in these types of yogas, which again, coming back to the breath, a lot of certain breath work and holding energies at different points of the body while you're doing different physical movements. You know, this is considered quite an advanced set of yogas. So I did this. We went through the whole range of the yogas. It took about 3 weeks of going every morning from like 5:30 in the morning till 7. And then after that, I was definitely, he'd caught my eye, let's put it that way.
Okay.
But it took 2 more years before we actually came together, because this was it was I guess we could call it a huge leaping of orbit, both for him in that sense of cultural and societal, not so much for me in that sense, because my society and my culture had already released me a long time before this happened. But he had to have that initial release from his society and culture. And for me, it was, I'm trying to put words to it, but it was, anyway, it was a huge leap of orbit that took me into this relationship and marriage. And so we finally came to live in India after some years, and after Rinpoche passed away, we came to live in India. And this is where coming back to my pictures that have become, the pictures are actually 2-dimensional. They're not paint. They are, let me describe what they are. Each of these pictures takes 2 to 3 years each to make, except for the first 2, which I made quickly because I'd had this sudden thought in my mind that I want to do a huge exhibition in the world somewhere with all these photographs I've taken after a trip I'd made into the mountains of Nepal. I had all these photographs and I wanted to do something with them. Now, actually, we can backtrack on that story if we've got time, because there's a reason why I was even taking photographs. When I first came to Nepal in 2001, I was taken again on a very spontaneous trip to this area of northern Nepal called Mustang, to the monastery of Muktinath. And we hadn't been able to fly up to the small airport that's not so far away from this location, because the monsoon rains were just like ravaging the landscape, and none of these little planes were going to take off in such weather. So after 3 days of going to the airport and never being able to board the flight because the weather was too awful, I was with the Lama of Muktinath, who had to go to his monastery, and he'd invited me to come along with him. And he said, we've got to go back to Kathmandu. I'm like, what? You're kidding. I'm not coming all the way here to go back to Kathmandu, kind of thing. Is there any other way to get there? And he said, yeah, by walking. I'm like, let's do it. Let's walk. So there was him, there was his architect friend who was coming up to make out some drawings of the monastery buildings because they were going to start renovating, the architect's daughter and the cousin of that architect's daughter. So we were a group of 5. Anyway, the story of that and all of that, I'm not going to tell, but I'm going to tell the first detail. We left the airport, jumped into a taxi, got to the end of the road where we would start walking, and we had some lunch. And after lunch, I went to one of these rickety little rectangular buildings where they have a toilet inside. And I put my lovely digital camera onto the ledge, just like that. And unfortunately, that rickety cabin, just if you turned around and moved anything, would jog the whole thing. And my lovely digital camera fell down and smashed on the ground. I mean, not into smithereens, but broke to a point that it was not going to work anymore. So on that trip, Lama of Muktinath had given me his little camera, which was a click and wind, and I'd taken pictures there and when I stayed up there for 3 weeks. Anyhow, now fast forward to 2005, and again, there's a bit of a backtrack to this story, but it'll take a long time. It ended up with Rinpoche asking me to go to Muktinath. So this is 4 years later. He said, if you have the time and if you have the money, please go to Muktinath. And again, he would tell me, if you have, again, you know, means the next day, if you have the time, if you have the money, please go to Muktinath. And so after he said this to me very strongly, I was like, okay, the guru tells you something. It's not like he's telling me go there. He's saying, if you have the time, if you have the money. So there's an element of choice in there, but really there isn't a choice. And
Yeah.
I knew in my heart I was going to go, and I did go. And that's where, apart from a really amazing story that happened during a period of meditation there and subsequent traveling around the valley. What I did do was take 1,200 photographs on that trip. Again,
Wow.
a small backtrack. 2 years prior to Rinpoche telling me to go to Muktinath, and also instructing me to take photographs while I was there. That's something I missed out from before. 2 years prior to that, Muktinath Lama gave me an old click and wind camera, a Pentax from the 1960s that was the very best of its time. But its light meter no longer worked. I tried to get it repaired. I couldn't. But by the time I went out to Muktinath, I took this click and wind camera with me, and I'd had a few lessons from photographers who, you know, knew about how to set the aperture, how to set the shutter speed. Normally on these modern cameras, we just press the automatic button and it does it all for us. But with a light meter, it would, inside these old cameras, it would tell you put the aperture speed like this, put the shutter speed like this. But because the light meter wasn't working, I didn't get any instruction. So I learned how to point the camera at something and sort of judge, well, there's a lot of light, it should be this much aperture. It's the shadow, it should be this much shutter speed. I kind of learned the very, very basics. But because I was inexperienced and not very good at it, I ended up taking hundreds in the range of the 1,200 photographs I took in the 2005 trip that Rinpoche had sent me on. I ended up taking hundreds of photographs that were catching the subtle realm. Lots of rainbows, lots of, you know, pouring into valleys and capturing the rainbow around the sun. And, you know, these are things we can see with our physical eyes. But on top of that, things which you wouldn't normally necessarily expect to see there, you know, like pillars of light and rainbows and this and this. So it was a good mistake, let's put it that way. So it was from these 1,200 photographs, when I had them developed, I was like, wow, what a lot of potential here. I'd love to do a huge exhibition in some major city like London, New York, Paris, whatever, one of these major cities. But first, what I should do is a practice exhibition here in Kathmandu. So I found a place where they would hold an exhibition and set a date. And then I knew that I had to produce, I mean, I could just blow up some photos, stick them in a frame and have an exhibition. But as I was deciding which photos I may choose to blow up and put in a frame, some of these more extraordinary pictures started to jump out. Actually, some were not so extraordinary. They were quite ordinary. And I started to put them to one side. And then I started to play with them and I sort of made this cross shape. And then I arranged them in the form of the elements. So there'd be wind and fire and earth and water and space in the center. I'm like, oh, I can play with photographs and I can make meanings out of them. So this was the birth of what I call my photo collage art, in which I embed universal truth into photographs arranged in certain shapes. And then to add to that, I subsequently, later on, I decided that I could use color to support this. So instead of just putting you know, in that corner are pictures of wind, I will also incorporate the shape of wind according to the Vajrayana Buddhist texts that I was studying under Chögyam Rinpoche. And so I can use, say, for the wind, the color green, which is what they use for the wind. And on top of that, I could put photographs which have meaning of wind, like prayer flags blowing, or grass in the fields, or leaves in the tree, or clouds in the sky, which are, you know, you can see they're blowing fast across the sky. I can use all these kinds of photographs to express a meaning. So actually, as my pictures have gone on one by one, and now 18 years later, I'm about to complete the 8th, which tells you how long each photograph each photo collage art piece takes. I've got more and more daring in how I express what I now come to call universal truths in each of my pictures. So picture number 1 and 2 were born and went into this exhibition. And so picture number 1 and 2 were born very quickly. But then subsequently, a couple of years later, when I moved to India with my husband, he helped me to remake both of the pictures using color, using shape, using, you know, these things I had already used, but at a much lesser degree. And now I was going to expand on their use and make them help me. They were to help me describe these universal truths. So the first 2 pictures really took between 2005 and 2009. 4 years, 2 pictures, 2 years per picture. Actually, it's normal. Wow. But for the first exhibition, I just made something, put them up for the exhibition, and then actually they were very, very simple. It was just the idea was now taking birth. Yeah. And we actually held a beautiful evening where people came. I described what I could about the meaning of the picture, but again, I have to say, and this is a recurrent theme in my pictures, is it sounds a bit odd to say I don't really know what I'm doing it when I'm doing it, but because it feels right, I do it anyway, and the picture is made. Some things I know and other things I'm just doing because it feels right and I see that, yes, it has a place, can't describe it yet. And later, much later, years later, decades as it's turning out to be later, I get insights as to what it really means. Why? Because subsequently I've made all the other pictures to date. And each of those, if I take the meanings and the focuses in those pictures back to those first ones, I can now interpret them differently. So what am I trying to say here is, for a period of several years per piece, 2 or 3 years per piece during the last 18 years, I have actually been building section by section, part by part of a larger machine. These pictures are 2-dimensional and the machine is 3-dimensional. But the information is in each of the pictures as to serve that purpose in the machine, as a greater function, at a greater function.
So I want the audience to really understand, because you're touching on it and you're saying it, but I want to make sure that they grasp that as you're viewing these pictures, the study of universal harmonics has been put into play. The study of the Tibetan Book of the Dead has been put into play. The study of the universe in and of itself has been put in play. The study of frequencies has been put in play. I mean, there is such a plethora of huge understanding behind your artwork that we haven't even touched on. I mean, it would take us hours and hours and hours, and I'm encouraging you to start a little talk show so that we can deep dive into some of the mysticism, some of the topics, because I love the depth by which what you're calling the magician's jewel, which is your machine, which people cannot truly appreciate it until they take the time to look at your website and to understand that the mysticism and the beauty behind all of the topics that you've brought together to complete the whole for this is mind-blowing. Is mind-blowing. So talk to us a little bit about the studies that you just even had to touch on to be able to bring this beautiful piece that you're calling the magician's jewel.
Well, like you said, that is a very huge discussion. And I want to take it right back. Actually, let's go to the beginning.
Okay.
Of how I make the work itself, how I actually, I mean, I say picture, what do I mean? A piece of paper with paint on it? Do I mean like pencil drawing? What do I mean? What I mean is a thick layer of plyboard, which is averagely about 6 feet by 6 feet. And in some cases elongated. One of them is 10 feet by 3 feet, for example. One is 7 foot by 3 feet. So we're talking about large sizes. So I'll take the plyboard and then I'll cover it with a cloth, a colored cloth. So now you're saying, okay, you take a plyboard, you cover it with cloth. Okay, let's back up a minute. The plyboard doesn't come in the shape of a circle. It has to be sawn. It has to be measured. We have to find the central point and make a circumference. Then it has to be physically cut. And then there's a choice. What color is the base? Why would I put a white base? Why would I put a red base? Why would I put a dark blue base? Why would I use this color? What is the meaning I'm putting into that background color? The cloth. We go to the cloth shops. Here in India, we have plenty of beautiful cloth shops, and they have ranges of cloth across the colors across the board. So we go there and I'm looking at the cloth, I'm looking at the texture, I'm looking at the color, I'm looking at the kind of, you know, will it fray? Will it little silk pieces come off it? Will it, you know, I'm looking at it from many different angles. And then purchasing the cloth, cutting it up to size, pasting on the glue onto the huge plyboard, and then two of us, Jamyang, my husband, on one side, and me, pulling it so it's taut and then putting it down and then spreading it so it doesn't crease. And this, and all the time now your hands are sticky as hell, you know. And then we have to put it,
Yeah.
you know, bring it round and on the back, and then it has to be stuck onto the back and cut into shape. And now we've got the plyboard with the major principal cloth covering the plyboard. And then we've got the shapes. We've got the, and at this point, with the first two pictures, I made the design first and then I put it on the board. I don't do that anymore. I study, as you mentioned, many different aspects that correspond to this particular picture that I'm making. And then I let all that go. This is after 8 pictures. It wasn't like this with my first few pictures. It was much more step by step. Now I take all that information, I let it go, I sit with the board and I do it. I do it. I've already got hundreds of diagrams that I've scribbled even onto napkins in restaurants as the ideas come to me or whatever, and pieces of paper, diagrams that are totally wrong, I'm never going to use, but anyhow, it was an exploratory process that I had to go through while I was preparing to sit in front of this now blank board and put all of that into it. That's what I do now, not what I did 18 years ago. So you see, there's also been a change and a development and because of experience, also an expansion in the way that I would approach my pictures today that I would 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So just to continue now, to put the shapes down onto the picture, and it's the same for all the pictures, I will cut hard cardboard, so like a good few millimeters of cardboard thick, and then cover that with the relevant colored cloth, and then stick those shapes onto the board, which already has the master cloth on it. Now you see we've got a raising up of the, it is two-dimensional, but because of the cardboard aspect, it's now there is a sense of texture to it. So the shapes will go down with the colored cloth on, and then the pièce de la résistance is the final stage of adding the photographs. Because already you could leave it as a base with shapes on it, colors, it's already telling a huge story. Yeah, the colors are telling a story, the shapes, the placement, the this and that. But the photographs, the theme of the photographs, which again sometimes takes some time before I realize what the theme of the photographs will be for this particular picture. The theme of the photograph, so for example, in one of my pictures, Mirror of Space, I use water at different levels of solidity. So you've got water as ice, like snow on the mountains, ice droplets, little, could be snow on the branches of trees or whatever, anything to do with snow and ice. Then you've got the liquidity of water, where I photograph the texture of water surfaces. There might be bubbles, there might be fluid water, and you might be able to see through to the bottom of the pool, and it might have colored stones or whatever. So you've got the fluidity of water, and then you've got the gaseous state of water. So clouds, cloud formations, rainbows around the clouds, or whatever. So I will pick photographs which match those 3 levels of water, and then put them into the places where they should go on top of the cardboard, the colored cloth, which is stuck onto the cardboard, which is stuck onto the plyboard base, which is also covered in cloth. So we put the photographs onto there, and then you see what happens then, not just because there's a theme and now you've got a story about water. Oh yeah, a story of water existing simultaneously as solid, liquid, and gas. Okay, that's one thing. But you can take that to another level of our existence, of us existing in different dimensions at the same time, simultaneously. So the themes are expanded by the photographs that I choose and use to put into the pictures. But not only that, I have also discovered that the photographs are like the consciousness of the picture. So you've got the form of the picture with the shape, which is like the physicality, and the photographs give it is the life force, is the consciousness, is the being of the picture. Now we're going to expand those two-dimensional pictures into three-dimensional parts of a machine. And that's where we're coming on to what you were mentioning, the Magician's Jewel, which is the installation I'm working on right now, which includes each of these two-dimensional pictures have become three-dimensional aspects of themselves, which are now all put together in one installation piece and move together to create a larger being, a larger result, a larger purpose, a larger sense of raison d'être. I mean, I don't know how you want to put it. There are many ways to express it, its purpose and its potential, actually.
And when I see your artwork, I feel the frequency by which of the colors that you chose, by the dimensionality that is displayed. There's so many layers. There's so many beautiful layers there that just being in its presence just brings joy to the heart. So I absolutely love it. And I know how much, not just physical work that went into it, but the understanding of the culmination of so many different things, the culmination of the biogeometries, the culmination of all of the different aspects that you drew from to represent within this particular art piece that you're working on. And to me, it's almost like we can call you an artist, but really you're an old soul remembering the ancient particulars that you always brought forward, and you're just doing it in this lifetime. So I don't know how that sits with you, but I'm going to just call it what I see.
Well, thank you for your very kind words there. I mean, it's true that a lot of work goes into it, not just the physicality of making it, which is really sticky fingers and cutting, you know, cutting and gluing and shapes and taping. But you mentioned, for example, what you glean from them is a certain frequency. But, you know, I didn't put a certain frequency into them per se. It wasn't like I chose this picture is operating at this frequency and this is operating at this frequency. No. I made the pictures. And, you know, I also do believe that the use of the 10 fingers, which are, you know, always in you know, in relation, working in relation to our consciousness, even at a relative level, that through our own innate life force, which is powering that consciousness, which of course is connected to greater life forces. We're all connected to, you know, ultimately to whatever we want to call the universal life force. We're all connected to that source space, that space of, as they say in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bodhidharma, they say the clear light. And so in a sense, using the physical body to actually cut and stick and arrange and all the rest of it is, in a sense, infusing life force into an animate picture, into an animate object, because you are leaving behind something of yourself at every single position of the picture, not just because you thought about it, because you actually physically used your hands in cooperation with your brain in order to make that design. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into,
Yeah.
the artificial intelligence and drawing pictures and all of that, because it's to be seen how much life force will remain in that kind of art. I don't know. I'm not going to judge it at this point. But I do think there's something about us using our physical body to infuse life force into an inanimate object.
And I think you're absolutely right, because I'm sitting here and I'm getting chills because I make indigenous drums, I make rattles. That's what I choose to give breath to give life to. And that process for me, when I'm in that frequency of making and creating, I can't even explain it. It informs me what is supposed to take place, what it's supposed to look like, and what pieces are called to it, such that I know that when I complete a piece, when I complete a drum, when I complete a rattle, when I complete whatever particular piece that I'm working for in that it has a life force of its own. And then it's also so interesting to watch that as it sits and as I created it during the full moon, during all of these different phases of energy that's come together, who is called to it, and how they're called to it. Because some pieces I've made, and I do sell them sometimes some I can't part with. And the frequency by which the person who is drawn to it is, I could see the alignment. I could just see how they're so drawn to it and how they'll appreciate it, and what they see in it that I saw in it as it was being created. And I just think it's a beautiful process, and it's one that's hard to understand. I remember taking a drawing lesson for the first time. I've only taken a couple, and I was taking one with a beautiful woman out of upstate New York who happens to be Indian, and she shared with me, she said to me, Enolia, once you have committed to drawing an object, the object informs you when it's done. You don't say it's done. It informs you that it now feels complete.
You have given birth to an entity. Yes.
Yes. And at first I didn't get it, but as I drew, and I drew more, and I drew more, and I drew more, and I drew more, I got it. It hit me. It hit me that it was saying, no, not that line here, line there. And it works through you, because I've taken only 2 lessons, 2 different artists have worked with me in my whole life. Really, I shouldn't be able to draw the way that I draw, but I know that it comes from me and within me and through me. Mm-hmm. It's not coming, because I took this class. Here it is, and the technicality. All of that stuff for me just goes right out the window. And I just get informed. And it's just so beautiful to see that process happening at such a massive scale for you. I think
also when sometimes when I'm making the picture, I'm putting certain elements into it that I don't really know why I'm doing that, but it all makes sense somewhere. There's a knowing. Yes, it should be like that. And I just trust, and I do it. Then, of course, there are these eureka moments when the unknowing of why you, or the unconscious knowing of why you did something becomes a conscious knowing. Maybe you read it in a book, maybe somebody tells you, maybe you hear it somewhere, whatever. So there comes a point where you understand what you have done. And it may come with a prompt, or it may not come with it may come without a prompt. And that is pure magic, that moment.
Yes.
Because it's a confirmation of your trusting a knowing without questioning that knowing, no matter how irrational it may have seemed in that moment. You didn't say, oh, that doesn't fit into my reality. You've pushed your boundaries enough in order to accept what comes in as true, to do it, and then for it to tell you later on what you did, and you go, okay, now I know. Thank you very much for telling me. I didn't actually need to know why I did it. But anyway, it's even more beautiful to know why I did it. So thank you for telling me. But then you see there's another step in the whole process. So you've given birth to this piece of work. But now, like us, this work also grows up.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it starts to dictate what you want, what it, wants you to do with it. I want
Yes.
you to take me there and exhibit me. Or, for example, in the case of my pictures, or as what's happened latterly, is we are all cogs in a machine. Now put us together.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so as your creation grows up, its demands become more they become bigger, yeah, just like children. Small children ask for small things and bigger children ask for bigger things. So again, they grow, but you see how beautiful it is. But in the growing up of the pictures and of their demands or their requests becoming active or conscious in your own mind, you also have to grow up. They are infringing on your judgment of reality and taking you beyond your boundaries. Again, we're coming back to leaping orbit, forcing you to leap orbit in order to access and work in the world that they're coming from. I mean, we're talking about shapes, we're talking about frequencies, we're talking about putting these things together and creating form. We are dealing with the subtle realm. We're dealing with the archetypes of existence. And that's matching our own access to those archetypes. We may not be able to rationally know what this or that means when we create the picture, but years later, that kid is growing up and now telling you, hey, mom, you put a portal to another universe inside my picture. You know, this is how it works.
That's right.
You wrote the meaning of a vortex into me. Now I'm growing up and I'm going to tell you what I know about myself. You know, and the kid now starts to reflect back on you, what you knew inherently. Now the reason of it comes back through the kid itself in that sense. It's quite a nice way of describing it, actually, and as a generational thing, because it it also happens with our own kids. They become mirrors of ourselves too.
Yes.
And so in the form of the pictures being kids, they grow up and they start to say, whoa, this is what we are. And now it's like, oh, okay, and now I have to look at you in a different way, as we do with our kids as they grow up. We treat them differently as they grow into different ages. So it's like, okay, now you're growing up, picture number 5, picture number 6, whatever. And you're now telling me you're so much more than I ever consciously realized you were. And now let's work with you in a bigger way. So, I mean, this is a very simplistic way of talking about how I created the Magician's Jewel, but something like that. The information about what the pictures really are started coming, and then I was able to put them together along with studies and research into other fields of mysticism, esotericism, and philosophy, and all the rest of it. Music, yeah. Universal harmonics, whatever, many different genres of study, which I do not pretend to be an expert of any, but I've delved into this and that and this and that. And now is all pouring into the Magician's Jewel, which is the sum total of all these little parts. The little beings are coming together to make another whole purpose and whole being.
Yeah. So, this is going to be a perfect time to take pause. And we're a little over an hour. And I wanted to ask you, if is there anything that you want to leave the audience with at this time as your last words? And please do share where they can look up more about the Magician's Jewel and all of your work.
Well, something that I've learned through this process, and in a way I've already said it in the conversation we've just been having, is to not be afraid of your own desire, your own wishes, and your own need to explore certain subjects and certain places on the earth, certain types of people even, because it's through responding to our own wishes and ideas about life. And we don't need to know what our purpose is immediately, right now, today, but we need to walk towards that. And we walk towards that by responding to our own understanding of life and what we enjoy and what feeds our enthusiasm, and where we may not even know what our potential is. We may not even know what we're good at. But by responding to these little calls of interest, not pushing them away because of some rational reason, like I need to pay the bills. I spoke about in my previous conversation with you, I had to leap off a cliff and say, I've only got so much money, I'm going to do this meditation retreat. It feels like the right thing to do. And the moment I did that, the money came from somewhere else and allowed me to continue that wish and expression to delve into this subject for how many years in an intensive way. So you said a last thought, and I've gone way off into into other things now.
No, this is appropriate. It's so appropriate.
But the trust and the listening, and these are the keys, and these are the step-by-step lily pads on the water that we can traverse what we don't think is possible, i.e. we can't walk on water, but lay out a lily pad and we could at least hop from one to the next, so to speak. I just, that metaphor came up, so I used it. And of course,
So
you wouldn't want to stand too long on you wouldn't want to stand too long on a lily pad.
I know.
Just keep going, leap. And yeah, my website, where all of my work is condensed into different categories and sections, is www.pyramidkey.com, Key, as in key to the door, pyramidkey.com. And there I have sections on my writings, on my photography, on including the photo collage art, and gallery sections with other photographs. And I have a section on installations, where a couple of the pieces of artwork that I've already made, and this Magician's Jewel that I'm in the process of making now, is there. Articles, writing, other things like that. Events I've done in the past are also there. Conferences I've spoken at, and podcasts or conversations with people that I've done as well. Meditation sessions I've held, and workshops, things like that. They're all there in the events. Then I've got a section called Up and Coming that is always behind time, because it's the last section that I update, and I've already completed almost completed a piece of work before it goes in Up and Coming. So excuse that section. It's not really usually very current. But apart from that, it's quite easy to navigate the website. It's not a very difficult layout.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to have you on here. I want to have many more talks with you. And I pray that we can pull that piece together and expand on some of those beautiful topics that you shared about. So this has been Susan Griffith-Jones. Thank you so much for joining us. And this has been another episode of The Infinite Way. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.